So we take a look at this lesson. We're going to do a bit of review, but we're going to take a look more at square root functions, what we call ugly fractions. We'll get to what that means here in a second. But if we review, we learned way back in middle school how to combine like terms. So let's review that really quick. So when you combine like terms, they have to have the same variable. So here, both of these have an x, so we can combine them. And when you combine them, you just combine the coefficients, the numbers. So 12 minus 14 is negative 2, and then you just tack on an x. It doesn't become x squared, it just becomes negative 2x. If we take a look at b, this has a y, but this has a w, this term has a w, and this term has a w. So we can combine the two w terms. There's nothing we can do with that 9y, so it's just going to stay 9y. But 3w minus, and that's technically a 1, 3w minus 1w is 2w. So that just becomes 9y plus 2w. We can't combine the y and the 2 because they are not like terms. They don't have the same variable. If we take a look at C, we can multiply non-like terms together. You just can't add or subtract them. So when we multiply terms that aren't the same, that are not alike, you just multiply the coefficients. 9 times 4 is 36. And then y times m, you just leave it as ym or my. Okay, either way is fine. Technically alphabetical order, but it doesn't matter. When we multiply 11x and 2x together, those are like terms. So you're still going to multiply the coefficients. 11 times 2 is 22. But x times x, when you multiply like terms or like bases, you add the exponents. Each of these have an exponent of 1, and 1 plus 1 is 2. So that becomes 22 times x squared. We can use this to help us combine radicals or do operations with radicals. So adding radicals, subtracting radicals, multiplying radicals. So we take a look at A. We have radical 2 plus radical 2. That is just like doing x plus x. They each have a coefficient of 1, and they're like terms because they are the same radical. So here we just are going to add the numbers. You're going to do 1 plus 1, which is 2. And then you just tack on the radical 2, just as if it was x plus x, just like we did in this example right here. X plus x would be 2x. So radical 2 plus radical 2 is just 2 radical 2. You just tack on the radical at the end, just like you tack on the x. If we take a look at B, they are not like terms. One's radical 7, the other one's radical 5. So because they are not like terms, there's nothing we can do. We can't combine anything. So you literally just leave it as radical 7 plus radical 5. With C, again, these are like terms. They have the same radical. They both have a radical 5. So we are going to combine the coefficients. We're going to do 6 minus 4, which is 2, and then tack on the radical. Just as if it was 6x minus 4x, that would equal 2x. 6 radical 5 minus 4 radical 5 is 2 radical 5. You treat the radical like a variable. If we take a look at D, again, this is a like term, and this is a like term. There's no other radical 5, so that's just going to stay radical 5. But 7 radical 3 minus 3 radical 3 is 4 radical 3. E, we're multiplying. When you're multiplying radicals, they don't have to be the same. When you multiply a radical, you just multiply the numbers out in front. Technically, there's a 1, so there's really nothing to multiply. But here, 5 times 2 is 10. So that becomes radical 10. If we take a look at F, We have 3 times radical 6. 3 is not underneath a radical, so we cannot multiply the 3 and the 6 together. That literally just becomes 3 times radical 6 or 3 radical 6. They both have to be underneath a radical, or they both have to not be underneath a radical in order to multiply them. If we take a look at G, they are both underneath a radical, so we can multiply those together. When we multiply, you can make your radical and multiply the numbers underneath. 7 times 11 is 77. So that becomes radical 77. Again, check to see if you can simplify. We can't simplify radical 10, can't simplify radical 6, can't simplify radical 77, but always check for that. And if we take, I'm going to look at something really quick. Okay. If we take a look at H, again, they're both underneath a radical. We can multiply them together. Radical 3 times radical 8 becomes radical 24. Here's the thing. Always look to see if you can simplify, and we can. The largest perfect square that can go into 24 is 4, and it can go in 6 times. And I'm not sure how your teacher writes it. This is how I write it, I'm sorry. So that becomes 4 times 6 underneath. 4 is a perfect square, so it's going to leave. The square root of 4 is 2. The 6 is not a perfect square, so it stays. So your final answer is actually 2 radical 6. If we take a look at I, we have 10 radical 3 times 4 radical 5. So what you're going to do is you multiply the numbers that are not underneath a radical together. 10 times 4 is 40. Then you're going to multiply the numbers that are underneath a radical together. So 3 times 5 is 15. So that becomes 40 radical 15. Can't simplify radical 15, so you are done.